This interview is brought to you by Netflix.
So happy to be joined by Eric Bolches, lead designer on Killzone Shadowfall. Are we at the point to say congratulations? Your game is done, or?
We're very close, very good, but you can congratulate me anyway.
I'll go ahead and congratulate
you. Thank you very much.
I think the first question is, like, this is sort of the big launch game for the PS4. No pressure.
Right, well, just a little bit.
I mean, what is that kind of like? I mean, do you feel that you need, obviously you guys are interested in making a really good game,
right,
but there is that kind of need to also sort of showcase and make a statement for the value of having a brand new console.
Right.
How do you balance those two?
It wasn't actually that hard because Guerrilla, like, as a company ourselves, we have very high ambitions. So yes, we are a new platform. Yes, we're a launch title that sets the bar really high, but we would have anyway for ourselves. We really want to innovate. We really want to create a new experience, especially with this one. We wanted to kind of freshen it up a little bit. I mean, yes, you have like a deadline, like a very set deadline that you have to adhere to. That makes it slightly more tricky because you get to a stage in development where you go, okay, we can't add anything more anymore. So that makes it trickier, but our ambitions are just as high as Sony's, so that's more of a natural progression in that sense.
I've just got a chance to play the game.
Sure.
I have to say, I was slightly skeptical at the beginning about
Okay.
you guys wanting to give players all this choice in these branching paths. I have to say, having now played it, you guys really did deliver.
Okay, cool.
The level design, really, I kept on discovering as I would backtrack and getting a little bit lost. I would notice that there are alternate routes. What was kind of the philosophy? I mean, player choice is something we all want to say we want to have in a game, but there's also, you can give too much to the player.
Right.
How did you, especially in the idea of a shooter, which has its own challenges, want to give the player a sense of freedom, but also make sure that they were still having fun in the process?
Right. Well, for us, like it was the realization, or at least the acknowledgement, that everybody plays differently, right? So we, as a developer, we often say like, hey, this is what the product is. This is how you should play it. And we actually, for ourselves, we kind of went, that's actually not a good way to approach games. Everybody has a different playstyle, and we want to enable people to use that playstyle. So when we developed, for example, the Owl, with all the different abilities, we had very different kinds of abilities in mind as well to allow for different types of playstyles. And you're right, it's quite daunting, even as a developer, to kind of say, hey, there's lots of options, because it also means that there's lots of options to play your game. There's a lot more bulletproofing that you're going to have to do. So it was scary for ourselves as a developer, but I think we've done a pretty good job in providing that variety.
Let's talk about the Owl. This is an apparatus that the player has that can offer shielding. Right. It can kind of go out and start to soften up the enemies for you. That I was not expecting, actually, in terms of just, you have the player choice in terms of what path will I take, what weapon will I have, but then is the Owl to help try to balance everything out for the player that may be a little underskilled or maybe making choices that are not ideal in the particular circumstance? A little
bit. Like having a reliable buddy, that's kind of how we see it, there helps you a lot. Like we give you more options, but we also take away some of the abilities and give it to AI, in this case the Owl. So even when you don't want to micromanage how your Owl works, it's always a good idea to just send it over to a specific area, let it defend that area, and kind of take away some of the heat on you. Because inherently, with adding more choice, adding more options for the player, you make your game more difficult. So in this kind of balances it out, in a sense, where you can use your Owl to give yourself a little bit of breathing space, make up a new plan, and then kind of continue playing.
Let's talk a little bit about the level design, because I think that's what really struck me immediately. Like, hold on, there's a lot to do here. What was kind of the philosophy in approaching that? Because especially when you're in the slums of New Helgen, I mean, it feels like this dense warren of various paths. Though, as you play, I mean, clearly, there are some primary paths through that.
Sure,
it's a very interesting trick of the eye that gives a sense of immense option to the player.
Right. What we did was, okay, so the story in a sense is still linear, right? You still go through A to B to C, but it's the space in between that's really interesting for us as gameplay designers. You still get to the same point in the story that everybody gets to, but how you get there, that's what the interesting bit is. So we kind of wanted to create, for each encounter, for each setup, a type of like gameplay arena where we let you go. We say, hey, this is your starting point, that's your target, but in between there, you can find out how you get there and how you solve, well, not a puzzle, but how you solve the problem in that sense.
Ready to breach through the pool skylight on your go. We can breach right now or find another entry point.
We have to really weave that through the level design from the start.
You guys have heard this a lot, you know, Killzone 2, Killzone 3, the color palette, it's really dour and stuff like that.
Right.
You can already see that there's a lot more color,
Right.
but it is still consistent with the rather dark future vision that you guys have
Right.
really, you know, done quite a good job on. What was, I can see that you guys want to respond to sort of fan complaints, but also stay, you know, but be true to yourselves. How were you able to sort of pull that off? How did you approach the art direction?
Well, when we knew that we were going to be a PlayStation 4 title, when we knew that, you know, we're going to explore in the gameplay sense, we're going to explore a lot more what we can do. We also looked at the graphics and kind of go like, hey, you know, we want to freshen that up a little bit as well. We want to look what we can do with this new platform. We have a lot more, you know, a lot more memory, processing power, so you can do a lot more interesting bits. But what I, as a game designer, find really interesting is that the way the levels look, whether they're vibrant, light, dark, colorful, or not, changes how you play. It's really interesting. Some of the levels in Shadowfall are still like the older kind of style of the darker, grittier, you know, less vibrant. And it changes how people play because it changes how you see enemies, what options you can use, what combat distances you do. So the art style indirectly affects the gameplay style as well. And it's really experimenting with the variety of the options we have on the new platform within the levels. That's really interesting to us.
So there's, of course, single player, but it's
Right.
also multiplayer.
Right.
I think that brings its own new pressures with the fact that it's a launch title. I mean, you do have Call of Duty, you do have Battlefield that's
Right,
out there
right.
as well. What is kind of the important thing, especially with Shadowfall, that you want to distinguish Killzone from the other military, realistic or not, shooters that are out there when,
Right.
when it comes to multiplayer?
Right. Again, to us, it's gameplay variety, and that really shines through in a feature that we call warzones. Right. So we're going to allow people to create custom games. Now, other games do that as well. Custom games is not something that's new or different. But what we're going to do different is we're going to look at all the kind of custom war zones that people make and put them proactively put them on the front page. So when you log into Killzone multiplayer, we're going to pick the most popular custom war zones or the most interesting combinations, put them on the front page. So every time you log on, there's something different for you to play. Rather than say hey, here are the 12 modes that you have to play, we're going to open it up to the community and really let the community and the fans kind of decide what's interesting and what's not.
My final question. What you just described sounds very impressive, especially if you're the consumer. And
Right.
It's like, oh my hell, they're watching and they're listening to me. But that means your job is never done.
No.
I mean, does that cause you, I mean, we would look at kind of a gold disc. Hey, we launched it. Let's take a breather and do something
Right.
new. But now
Right.
it just kind of runs into perpetuity. Is that concerning from you from a creative standpoint?
No, it's just it's really interesting. It's a different mindset, and you have to kind of prepare for it as well. So we've got a dedicated team that's only going to look at the community and only going to churn out extra expansion packs, map packs, new features, patches, all of that. We've set that up to for the next year and a half to just non-stop create new content. It is a different mindset because you're right. Normally we'd ship the game, we'd have a party, and then we'd be hungover for 2 days, and then it's done. Now it's more like,
Not
hey,
anymore.
well, we're done, but we're not. So it's different for us, but ultimately it's the consumer that wins.
Well, the game obviously comes out with the launch of the PlayStation 4, and that is
Correct.
November 15th here in the United States. Eric, I wish you all the best. And
Thank you.
Same for your team. Thank you so much for your time.
Let's take a moment to thank our sponsor, Netflix. Netflix lets you stream movies and television shows directly to your home without having to deal with one of those pesky cable companies. As long as you have an internet connection and Netflix-enabled device, you're good to go. You can support Red3 games and sign up for a free trial membership by heading to netflix.com/Red3 Games.